Welcome to Midnight Confessions. You found us. Real people. Real stories. The kind that make you check your locks twice. These aren't fake ghost stories. They're confessions from people who saw something they shouldn't have. Heard footsteps in empty houses. Woke up with bruises they can't explain. Still here? Each story gets darker. The woman who found handprints on her ceiling. The guy whose reflection moved first. The kid who drew the man in his closet before anyone mentioned the murder. Which one will mess you up the most? Subscribe before something finds you first. New confessions every week. Don't watch alone. Let's start the story. My dad has always been a hard-working, successful business owner, and honestly, one of the best fathers anyone could ask for. He's a kind man, always there for my sisters and me, and honestly a much better husband than my mom ever deserved. They've been together since high school. Back in sophomore year, my mom literally yanked another girl out of his Jeep and climbed in herself because she wanted him. Big red flag. Their personalities couldn't be more different. Dad's easygoing, while mom is controlling and demanding. Every time she handed him a list of chores, he did it without a fight. Anything she wanted, she got. His brother and I used to tease him for being so whipped. By the time I was 13, they were drowning in over $90,000 of debt, all because my mom wanted a bigger house, a Mercedes, and other luxury things we couldn't afford. We went on fancy vacations, ate at restaurants that were way out of budget, and the only thing my dad ever pushed back on was going deer hunting with his friends 3 weekends a year. Even then, my mom complained about being left out. She always needed to be the center of his life, no matter what. But the real mask slipped about 4 years ago. My now wife and I were engaged, and my mom suggested a motorcycle trip. Dad and I ride often, but this time she invited along an old coworker, let's call him Jown. She said he was struggling after his divorce and needed a break. We went, had fun, but the vibe felt off. Jown was tall, fit, wealthy, and he spent way too much time taking pictures of my mom and dad. Creepy. Nothing major happened on that trip, but afterwards my mom started acting strange. My dad and older sister noticed too. At that time I lived with my fiancé, but my sister stayed with my parents since she was in grad school. A few weeks later, my fiancé, my sister, my mom, and I went to an Incubus concert. That's when things escalated. My mom was behaving totally out of character, smoking, chugging beers, and just being weird. 10 minutes in, she said she was going to grab another drink, but she disappeared for nearly an hour. After 40 minutes, I went looking for her but found nothing. When I came back, I asked my sister if she tried calling. She rolled her eyes and said, "She's probably talking to Jown." Then she hit me with a bombshell. Both she and dad suspected mom was having an affair. She explained how mom had been hiding things, changing her phone and iPad passwords, stepping outside for secret calls, whispering on the phone, even putting a jar of rocks on top of her phone at night so she'd hear if anyone touched it. Super shady. Apparently dad had managed to skim her texts with Jown before she locked him out, and what he saw was full of cryptic, suspicious messages. When mom finally came back to the concert, without the beer she claimed she left for, I confronted her. She brushed it off, saying she ran into old co-workers. I pressed her for names, and she stuttered before blurting out some obviously fake ones. My wife and sister were watching me grill her while Brandon Boyd sang in the background. I dropped it for the night, but I was furious. The next day, my sister told dad what happened. He confronted mom directly, demanding her call log. Sure enough, there was a 45-minute call to Jown during the concert, along with plenty of others. When he asked what the hell was going on, she insisted she was just helping a friend through his rough divorce and his alcoholic ex. But by then, no one was buying her story. I'll skip over the boring filler that could drag this story out forever and get straight into the important part. This back and forth had been going on for months. By the time my wedding rolled around, my dad had already put a tracker on their car, pulled phone records from the company, and was even considering hiring a private investigator. I still remember slow dancing with her at my wedding. She looked at me with pure affection, but I couldn't bring myself to meet her gaze. What neither my dad nor I realized at that point was that my passion for kayaking would soon expose everything he needed to know. A month or so after the wedding, I decided to spend a weekend with my old college roommate. We planned a few days of kayaking and fishing since he lived near my grandparents' lake house, my mom's parents. That day, I stopped by their place to grab my kayak. Out of nowhere, my dad called me just to chat, probably about the latest shady drama my mom had stirred up. As unhealthy as it might sound, he's my best friend, and those conversations had become our routine. When I told him I was heading to the lake house, he immediately warned me, "I doubt she'd be that bold, but your mom told me she was staying at the lake with her girlfriends this weekend." Just be ready in case that's not true. And if it isn't, tell me. I understood exactly what he meant. I purposely didn't tip my mom off that I'd be stopping by. Driving past, I was relieved to see just her car and another vehicle that looked like it belonged to one of her friends. I phoned my dad before going in and told him that, at first glance, everything looked normal, just her and her girlfriends. He was as relieved as I was. But when I knocked on the door, silence. The patio door in the back was unlocked, so I stepped inside. The very first thing that caught my eye was a leather motorcycle jacket draped over a bar stool. I recognized it instantly. It was Joun's. My heart started racing, adrenaline kicked in, my ears burned, and my vision blurred. A storm of questions ran through my head. Were they here? Did they know I was inside? Should I make my presence known? All I could think was, damn it, Mom, you're actually cheating. Acting fast, I assumed they weren't home yet but could return any second. I snapped a photo of the jacket, headed to the garage, and there it was, Joun's motorcycle. I took a picture of that too, then rushed back inside. On the kitchen counter, I noticed a few phones stacked while charging. I grabbed one I didn't recognize. No password. I opened the gallery, and the very first image showed two people I didn't know, plus my mom and Joun, kissing each other on the lips. I kept scrolling, but it was just more of the same nonsense. By now my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it could break through my chest. I quickly snapped a few photos on my phone and bolted out of the house, completely forgetting what I had even gone there for in the first place. I should explain something here. When I was 7, my mom left my dad for a doctor. He used her, discarded her, and when she came crawling back, my dad reluctantly forgave her. She blamed the doctor at the time, saying he had manipulated her. My dad admitted to me much later that he only took her back for the kids, planning to leave her after we were grown. But over the years, things improved, and he eventually forgave her. I remember their separation, but the full story only came out recently. Anyway, I sped off from the lake house and pulled onto a quiet side street, trying to slow my breathing and think clearly. That's when I called my younger sister. Should I tell Dad? How? Up until this point, no one had solid proof, just suspicions. My sister, who's always been the heart of the family, told me straight, he needs to know. He deserves the truth. I then called my wife, and she agreed, though both of us worried how Dad would react. Finally, I worked up the courage and called him. The moment he picked up, I just blurted it out, Dad, Mom is cheating on you. I've got proof. There was no delicate way to put it. He froze, repeating over and over, no way, damn it. God damn it. After the initial shock, he actually apologized that I had been the one to discover it. He said he was on his way, a 3-hour drive, to meet me at my roommate's place. I immediately rang my uncle, Dad's identical twin, who's also one of my closest friends. I told him I was afraid Dad might do something reckless. He promised he'd be there to keep things under control. They drove down together, and after hours of talking, we made a plan. Dad swapped vehicles with my roommate to stay under the radar. He swore he wouldn't do anything stupid, he just needed to see it with his own eyes. That night, after dark, he and my uncle parked far away and hiked through the woods with binoculars. Hidden behind the trees, Dad finally saw it. Mom and another man cuddled on the patio, kissing, drinking wine with another couple like it was completely normal. It nearly broke him, but somehow, he held himself together. Instead of storming in, he snapped photos and left. The next morning, Dad emptied their joint bank account, sent her the pictures, and texted, I know everything. I'm leaving you. I can only imagine how their little getaway fell apart after that. The following year was absolute chaos. Mom begged Dad to take her back, even after being caught red-handed. Dad agreed to give her alimony if she divorced without dragging lawyers into it. She reluctantly signed, but after the divorce, she spiraled. She cried daily, moved in with my little sister, got on antidepressants, and leaned on us constantly, even calling my wife in tears, which I hated. This was my wife's first year in the family, and suddenly my mom was dumping her emotional baggage on her. Mom's behavior grew worse. She painted herself as the victim, blaming Dad's twin brother for their marriage falling apart, claiming he had stolen my dad during hunting trips. She even tried convincing us she had been the one mistreated, when in reality everyone knew the truth. Her own parents and brother sided with Dad, refusing to entertain her lies. That left me, my sister's dad, and my wife to bear the weight of her breakdown. As for Dad, he embraced freedom like a teenager let loose. After years of pain, he was finally done. He's a good-looking man with money, but my mom's constant reactions wore him down. To cope, he turned to Bumble, spending weekends with women in their 30s and 40s, while riding his Harley during the week just to escape the pressure. My mom still doesn't know about those women, and honestly, after being tied to the same partner for 30 years, cheated on twice, and having every part of his life micromanaged, I think he deserved that release. He needed to let it out of his system. Fast forward, my wife and I were expecting our first child, but instead of celebrating, my mom's meltdowns consumed everything. I couldn't even get my family together in the same room to share the happy news. For nearly 10 months, she attacked my dad for not forgiving her, even using my unborn child as leverage. She said it would be his fault if their grandchild grew up with divorced grandparents. It infuriated me. Despite my sister and me urging him to stay strong, my dad eventually gave in. They sold the house and moved into a townhome together. Now, my daughter is 17 months old, and my parents' relationship has fallen back into the same pattern. My mom dominating his life. It's like watching a villain regain their powers. She went from broken and weak to manipulating everyone again. My wife, who's gentle and hates conflict, often gets pushed around by my mom, especially when it comes to our daughter. She guilt trips us, saying my wife's parents see the baby more, even though they live 4 hours away. Yeah, she's that manipulative. When I speak to my mom now, there's no warmth in my voice. I don't want to hate her, but her flaws are impossible to ignore. She thrives on control, and while we all still love her, I'm the only one who calls her out. My sister barely speaks to her. My daughter adores her, which makes me both happy and angry, because she doesn't deserve my dad, nor our forgiveness. Especially since this isn't the first time she cheated. I don't even know how to end this, except to say I wish my mom wasn't such a toxic presence. In a strange way, I'm grateful it all unfolded when it did. Otherwise, I might have struggled to trust women at all. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Honestly, I didn't expect anyone to care. I figured only a handful of people would read this. Seeing your comments, whether calling it fake, harsh, or relatable, meant more than I can explain. Thank you for letting me vent and for sharing your own stories. We're actually wealthier than anyone realizes. After selling our business this year, our net worth is over $10 million. But our kids, teenagers, have no clue. Our siblings don't know. Our parents passed away, and only our banker is aware. Despite it, we still live modestly, shopping at Walmart and Target, driving old Hondas and Toyotas. Maybe one day we'll buy a big lakeside home for $2 to $3 million, but for now, we're content with a quiet, minimalist life, decluttering instead of accumulating things. And here's something wild from my past. Back in the late 80s, I nearly flunked out of college. I was failing 2 out of 6 classes. One I salvaged by dedicating all my time to nailing the final exam. But the other, a tough science/engineering course, forced me into desperate measures. The professor mentioned that anyone with a 93% average could skip the final. And right then, I hatched a plan. I was sitting on a 64 average, which meant I had no choice but to face the final exam. But deep down I knew there was no way I could score high enough to save my grade. The only solution? Change my grades myself. That's when I came up with a desperate last-ditch plan. One that meant breaking not just school rules, but actual laws. The science building, where my class was held, locked up every weekend. Professors' offices were closed, and most labs were sealed too. You could still enter the main hallways if you spoke to security, but after hours there were no fancy digital badges or scanners like today. So on Friday afternoon, once classes were done, I cased the whole building. It was a tall, U-shaped structure, and I needed a way in. Luckily, I spotted one, a first-floor lab with wide windows that could be unlocked and crawled through. Even better, one of those windows was hidden behind a fenced-off area filled with HVAC and electrical units, with tall bushes covering the view. Perfect. I slid the window latch, giving myself an entry point, then checked that the lab door locked automatically. That meant no one would relock the window later. I also peeked at my professor's office. It was tiny, with a metal beige door, a desk, and barely any space. The only window was a small wired glass panel screwed into place. Breaking in wouldn't be easy, but I now had a clear plan. At 3:30 a.m. the next morning, I returned with my backpack full of tools, hammer, pliers, tape, and screwdrivers. My nerves were through the roof. I slipped through the bushes, hopped the fence, and crawled in through the lab window. The lab door automatically locked behind me, so I taped over the latch to keep it open. To my surprise, the building wasn't silent. Somewhere deeper inside, machines were running non-stop and a few grad students were working late. Oddly, that worked in my favor. It masked any noises I made. I crept toward the professor's office near the stairwell, which was a good escape route if anyone came by. I started unscrewing the frame of the glass window, but the screws were buried under decades of paint. What I thought would take 2 minutes dragged into 45. Finally, I forced the frame off and pried the glass out, slowly, carefully. After what felt like forever, I managed to reach through and unlock the door. To cover the damage, I grabbed a big manila envelope from his door and taped it over the window. Inside, I blocked the glass from glowing with light by taping up a desk calendar, then flipped the lights on. Now came the big moment. His desk drawer held the gradebook, handwritten, every class, every score. And his pen was right there too. I only needed to change one grade, mine, but seeing how messy the glass frame was after my break-in, I knew I had to camouflage my work. So instead of fixing just my scores, I went through every class. Anything in the 60s became 80s. Any 70s? Now 90s. I even boosted a few failing students to look like a student's. It was herd immunity for grades. If everyone's numbers looked inflated, mine wouldn't stand out. The book had nearly 3,000 grades. I changed at least half of them, about 1,500. My grade, of course, looked spotless by the end. I slid the register back, but the drawer clicked locked. Strange, it hadn't been locked before, but I figured the professor might assume he had done it himself. My adrenaline was racing as I thought about the fallout. Would this actually work? Could I dodge the exam entirely by creating academic chaos? That's when I noticed something on the back table, an IBM PC. A cold realization hit me. What if he also kept digital records? If those didn't match the gradebook, all of this could unravel. All the modified grades were now secured, the drawer firmly locked. I powered up the IBM PC XT, noticing it had two 3.5-inch disk drives. By the commutator, there were 5 disks waiting. I slid each one into the drive Type D, and wiped them clean. At first, I hadn't planned this, but once I was in mod mode, there was no turning back. The strategy was simple: adjust so many grades that it would take an impossible amount of time to sort through the chaos. Eventually, the only solution would be to distribute better grades across the board. With multiple students potentially motivated to alter results, no one person could easily be blamed. This way, everyone benefited, good grades for good students, and my tracks covered. Once finished, I gathered my tools and prepared my escape. The back of the door had items taped to it, so I quickly replaced the glass, covered it with a manila folder, and left a sloppy post-it note: "Sorry, mop handle cracked glass." Replaced glass. Maintenance. I slipped past a student by the grading machine, climbed out the window, and disappeared. I never returned, didn't even sit for the final exam. Why bother, when my record already showed an average in the 90s? That summer, after 45 long days of waiting, the grades were posted. I got a 90 in the class, not bad at all. Others surely noticed their grades improved too, and no one ever questioned it. Still, it was the most stressful night of my life, something I've never repeated. Fast forward, today I'm 50. I wrote this memory during a slow Thursday at work after it came back to me while scrolling through Reddit. People asked why I mentioned both 90 and 93 as averages. Back then, an A required a 93 on the 7-point scale to skip the exam. At first, I only changed my own records, but the risk was obvious. If only mine were altered, suspicion would point straight at me. For self-preservation, I changed all the grades. I left the building around sunrise, drained from hours of adrenaline. When results came, my average was a 90, technically below the requirement. That didn't make sense since I hadn't taken the exam. Looking back, I think it might have been a tactic: cap everyone at a B so that only legitimate A students would protest, exposing anyone who tampered with results. That's why I kept quiet. At the time, I was struggling. My father had passed away during my first year of college. Counseling wasn't common, and mental health wasn't openly discussed. I was likely on the verge of a breakdown. Coming from a small town, I'd believed I could breeze through college, but life crushed that dream. Losing my dad, my academic path, and my identity at 19 was overwhelming. Yet, in the aftermath, I found freedom. I transferred schools, switched fields, and discovered what I truly loved. The smaller campus, fewer distractions, and new subject fueled me. I excelled, earning straight A's, and built a career in design. Today, I run my own company, and chances are you've interacted with something I've created, even if you don't know it. Years later, I returned to that campus with my son for a tour. Walking past the building brought back a wave of dread, memories I thought I'd buried. He was excited about the school, while I silently relived my darkest night. The professor from that class still teaches there. He went on to earn his PhD just a year after the incident and now holds patents. I sometimes wonder if I accidentally erased some of his early research when wiping those disks. I've even thought about sending him this story anonymously, or calling him, just to learn what really happened after that night. Honestly, looking back, I realized this was probably one of the worst choices I ever made. And sure enough, it drew plenty of skeptics. My post had more than a few people questioning whether my story was even real, and I get it. This is the internet, after all. But here's the truth, everything I shared actually happened. If there are any errors, it's only in the small details, like the exact number of days. I remember waiting around 45 days for my grades that semester. Could have been 40, maybe even closer to 65, I don't recall perfectly now. What I do know is that I counted every single one of those days, because those grades were going to decide whether I sank or swam. And yes, I changed as many grades as I could. A 79 suddenly became a 99. A 66 was pushed up to an 86. Each adjustment felt like one more layer of protection, one more way to avoid being found out. The deeper I went, the harder it became to stop. Every time I thought I was done, I'd notice another grade that could be shifted. And of course, I changed it. When I posted about it later, the reactions were surprisingly positive. Lots of good vibes, plenty of karma. But let's be real, none of that was deserved. I didn't hand out good grades to help others or out of kindness. I did it to bury my own tracks and protect my standing. Afterward, I went home, completely drained, and slept most of the day. I still had an exam to prepare for, the one I was actually trying to pass legitimately, and even weeks later, I was left wondering what the fallout might be. A few professors who eventually heard about it weren't shy about sharing their disgust. And honestly, I can't blame them. Looking back now, decades later, I see how wrong it was. Hitting 50 has a way of making you reflect. You start to think about old mistakes and whether they can ever be corrected. Maybe they can't. But admitting them feels like a start. If there's a takeaway here, it's this. If something feels unbearable, like you don't belong in that place or path, maybe it's not where you're meant to be. Be honest with yourself. There's always another direction where you'll thrive. I got one of my biggest screw-ups out of the way at just 19. Some people carry theirs much later in life. But here I am, happy now with a good life, and grateful that it all worked out in the end. And that's it for today's disturbing Reddit confessions. I actually had a lot of fun putting this video together. It's a little different from my usual content, but it has the same vibe. Let me know in the comments below, do you want to see more stories like this? Do you want me to share my opinions on them? Or maybe tweak the style a little? Your feedback means everything. Thank you for sticking around until the very end, it really does mean a lot. This was Midnight Confessions, and I'll catch you next time.